the coming of the new king. If you want to like look at a picture like in history, when you come back and go, this is the moment where Ngannou arrived, and people realize like, holy shit, like this guy is for real.
If we talk about the most violent and vicious knockout artists of our era, it is impossible to have that conversation without mentioning the Predator, Francis Ngannou. The Cameroonian's mesmerizing power and raw ability to put his opponents to sleep were a sight to behold.
This guy is a fucking monster. I don't know if we've ever had a heavyweight champion as big and as mean looking as this fucking guy is.
His journey from the sand mines to becoming the UFC heavyweight champion of the world is nothing short of a movie script. But why did the baddest man on the planet leave the UFC? Born in poverty-stricken conditions in Cameroon, Francis Ngannou's childhood was far from normal. The family would often survive on one meal a day. At the ripe age of 6, he saw his parents split up. Much to the fact his father was a street fighter and would often come home and beat him and his mother. He would walk 2 hours to school with no notebook or pencil to write and get embarrassed in front of other kids. After getting kicked out of the school and seeing the unstable conditions around him, little Francis was only 10 when he started shoveling sand in the sand mines to support his family. At the age of 15, he lost his father to sickness as he could not afford the medical facilities. The fear of losing his mother the same way he lost his father lit up a fire inside Francis that he had to do something to change his life. As Francis never had a TV in his house, he occasionally watched video clips of Mike Tyson and dreamed of becoming just like him. When Francis turned 26, he made up his mind to escape the suffering and hardships burdened onto his shoulders to make up his destiny.
I was gonna rip his heart out. I'm the best ever. I'm the most brutal and vicious and most ruthless champion there's ever been. There's no one can stop me. Legs to the conqueror. No, I'm Alexander. He's no Alexander. I'm the best ever. There's never been anybody closer. I'm Sonny Liston. I'm Jack Dempsey. There's no one like me. I'm from Nairclaw. There's no one that can match me. My style is impetuous.
Escaping from Cameroon illegally was no easy task for the Predator, as he had to overcome several life-threatening situations that came his way. The biggest of them all was to cross the Sahara Desert and deal with the scorching heat, no water, gruesome sandstorms, and the risk of being looted along the way. After somehow managing to cross the desert, the next big challenge for Francis was to enter the Spanish territory. But to do that, one needs to cross either the deadly barbed wire fences or take the route of the cruel waves of the ocean. Francis failed 6 times to cross that dangerous fence and was thrown back into the desert every time he failed to escape. It took him 1 whole year to reach Spain after he risked his life and crossed the ocean to reach the Spanish territory of Ceuta. Francis took a train and moved to Paris to search for better opportunities. Being homeless there, he used to sleep in a parking lot. Eventually, Francis found a gym and met his trainer, Fernand Lopez. He took Francis under his wing and trained him for his first MMA fight after 4 months. Fighting in the French promotion, Ngannou quickly got off to a great start, and despite being inexperienced in MMA, he only had 1 loss in a total of 6 fights. This was when the UFC came calling for the Cameroonian in 2015, and he didn't look back ever since then. Making his debut in the UFC octagon, Ngannou was ready to wreak havoc in the organization, and so he did. His devastating power left his opponents for dead as he won his first fight in the UFC via knockout. The heavyweight division was on alert as Ngannou went on a scintillating run, facing the division's best and destroying everyone who dared stand in his way. He beat the likes of Anthony Hamilton, Andrei Arlovski, Curtis Blades, and Alistair Overeem to earn his way to the heavyweight title against the one and only Stipe Miocic. Due to Ngannou's ability to finish the fights in style with brutal knockouts, the UFC thought he might be the face of the heavyweight division in the years to come. That's when the first crack appeared in the relationship between Dana White and Francis Ngannou. Dana wanted to tie Ngannou into a new deal. However, Ngannou wanted to negotiate his dealings fight by fight instead of signing a long-term contract.
So could we go to the beginning? Like, when do you feel like things between you and Dana started to dissolve?
He was before the Stipe fight. My last contract was negotiated at that moment. I think the problem was because during all this negotiation, I said something to Dana White, and this was by completely mistake. I didn't even know what I meant at that time. And then sitting there with him, I'm like, let's just focus on this one. We can negotiate even after every fight. I think that was the thing that I said to Dana. And you shouldn't say something like that to somebody like Dana White.
Why do you think that would have bothered him so much?
The whole business is based on the contract. How many people is tied in the contract? If they don't have anybody on the contract, what is the value of the business?
Ngannou would lose in his first title shot in the UFC against Stipe Miocic at UFC 220. This only added fuel to the fire, as the UFC had been pushing Ngannou to be the next poster boy. But sadly for Dana, that didn't happen. Things only got worse from there as the UFC made another blockbuster fight between Ngannou and Derek Lewis, which ended in one of the most boring heavyweight fights in the organization's history. In the post-fight press conference, Dana White criticized Ngannou, openly implying that his behavior has been out of control since he came under the spotlight.
Thoughts on Francis Ngannou? I mean, he had so much momentum behind him going into the Stipe fight, shows the flaws in his game a little bit, then comes back and has this fight where he throws, 17 strikes the entire fight, something like that. Where do you feel a guy like that goes from here?
Horrible. I think that, he had a pretty quick rise here, and obviously the fight over Alistair Overeem, catapulted him, everybody was talking about him. I thought he was going to be the next guy. I think his ego ran away with him big time. I can tell you that his ego absolutely did run away with him.
Ngannou's sheer willpower and determination allowed him to rise like a phoenix from the ashes and run through the best contenders of the division. He went on an unbeaten run of 4 fights before eventually meeting Stipe Miocic in a rematch in March 2021. Ngannou secured a brutal knockout victory and sought his revenge against Miocic, impressing Dana White and becoming the UFC heavyweight champion. This indicated that the damaged relationship between Dana White and Ngannou was patched up, but it didn't last long. In his last fight of the contract, Dana wanted Ngannou to defend his belt against Derek Lewis.
Listen, Derek Lewis is the next in line. He's the guy who deserves the shot at the heavyweight championship. And yes, we will get that fight done.
But Francis opted to go out for a vacation to Africa. This didn't sit well with Dana, and he made an interim title bout by introducing Cyril Gane into the mix. Cyril Gane became the interim champ after he beat Derek Lewis at UFC 265, which set up a bad blood fight between him and Ngannou. The bad blood between the two fighters was because these two were training partners under the supervision of Fernan Lopez, but Ngannou changed his coaching team. It was evident that the UFC favored Gane to win the fight, as Ngannou was on the last fight of his UFC contract, but the Cameroonian spoiled the party and won against all odds at UFC 270. The win made Dana White so bitter that he was not even there to put the belt on Francis Ngannou during the crowning moment, which raised many eyebrows among the MMA community.
I noticed Mick Maynard put the belt on you and not Dana. Was that at your request? You didn't want Dana to do that, or why did that happen?
I don't know. You have to ask him.
So you did not have anything that you didn't say. I don't want Dana.
I do not have anything to do about that.
Okay.
I think that was their decision. I'm about to ask about that too.
It was revealed that Ngannou would have a long layoff from the octagon because of his knee injury sustained leading up to the Gane fight. This would give room to the UFC to negotiate a new, improved contract with Ngannou. Another twist in the tale was the much-anticipated return of John Jones to the heavyweight division. A super fight between Ngannou and Jones was what the UFC wanted to make, but they just couldn't come to terms. After a year out of the octagon and failure to agree to a new contract with the UFC, Dana White decided to strip Ngannou of his heavyweight title and set up a fight between John Jones and Cyril Gane for the vacant title at UFC 285.
What is the biggest issue from your standpoint? Is it simply money, or is it the other way, the way you're treated?
No, it's not simply money. I mean, obviously, money is a part of it, but it's also the term of the contract that I don't agree with it. You know, I don't feel like it's fair.
As much as Ngannou wanted to stay in the UFC, he demanded specific things such as healthcare insurance for all the fighters, sponsorships, and a fighter representative at the board meetings, which the UFC would have never agreed to. So, money wasn't the factor that made Ngannou leave the UFC. Will Ngannou return to the UFC one day? Only time will tell. But one thing he should be applauded for is standing up for his and the other fighters' rights. He will always be known as the man who refused to bow in front of a giant corporate organization.